Hi, I'm Tracy. Welcome to my channel if you haven't been here before, or welcome back if you watch my videos, and I thank you very much. I love to upcycle, and I turn, just ordinary thrifted items into fun, edgy clothes, purses, accessories. And today we're working on this tote bag or beach bag or overnight bag, whatever you want to call it. It's a big, roomy bag. And I made this, it started with a pillow sham that I got from Goodwill. Now, this doesn't have like a lot of pockets or closures on the inside, but I do have tutorials that I'll link in my description because I show you how to do pockets and magnetic snap closures and how to make straps and things like that. But we're not doing all that on this one. This has a lot going on, right? So my mom used to tell me by the inch it's a cinch, by the yard it's hard. And that's kind of the way it is with these purses. If you know kind of the basic procedure, one little step at a time, because nothing on here is really hard to do. It's just kind of knowing the steps to get there. And that's what I'm going to show you. So let's get started. This is the pillow sham I'm starting with. It's big, it's like a king size, and it kind of looks like it has a little quilting. The back is different, and I love that because the back will be different on the bag. So I just need to cut this open. I'm just cutting these two sides apart. I don't need them sewn together. Okay, so now I have my two pieces separated. This will be the back of the tote bag, and this will be the front. And the first thing I need to do is create a pattern. And this is just so simple. It's a square. Let's see if I have it. It's just a square, 20 by 20. And I use craft paper. I buy this by the bulk because I use it all the time for patterns and packing if I need to ship things. But you can use newspaper or wrapping paper. Wrapping paper is nice because a lot of times they have those grids on the back that you just really don't have to do a lot of measuring. But okay, so we have a 20 by 20 pattern. Now I need two pieces that are 20 by 20, one for the front of the bag and one for the back. So I'll do the front first. I'll turn this over. It'll be a lot easier to see on the back because it's all white here. And I'll lay that on there. And let's see. I'll just use a black marker. You can use whatever you want, but I'm just going to trace that. And then when I'm done tracing this one, I'll put the pattern on the back side of the fabric, or the fabric that will be the back side, and I'll trace that and cut it out. So I traced and cut the back, and I'm just finishing up the front side. And that's what that looks like. And now I want to decorate the front. I am just having fun with my fringes and trims here, and everything doesn't match perfectly, and that's okay. That's the boho look. Everything matched. You could go buy that in the department store. We want to look like somebody put this together and we found it in an old trunk. But okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I have this sequin sparkly hot pink trim, and I'm going to lay it on here diagonal. Just like that. And I'll put a few pins in it just so it doesn't shift around while I'm sewing. And I'll go to my machine and I'll coordinate the thread. I'll try to use a hot pinkish color thread. And I'll just do a small stitch, a fairly small stitch on one side and then go back down the other. Okay, so I have this one all sewn on. And I have 2 rows of stitching because it's a wide trim. And I went all the way to the edge and lined it up with that and just sewed over top of it and clipped any extra that was remaining on there. And now I'm just letting these lines in the natural fabric be my guides. And so I have this kind of mauve-y pink wispy fringe, and this is about 4¼ inches up, but you do your own thing. These are just my measurements. It doesn't have to be yours, that's for sure. And so I'll go to my machine and I'll sew this. I'll start at the very edge because this is thin. If it was thick, I wouldn't go all the way to the edge. I'd stop about 1/2 inch because we need to sew these sides when we sew the bag. So you got to be careful what you put, but this is thin enough that it won't cause any problems at all. So I'll go all the way to the edge and I won't pin it. I'll just follow that existing line. I'll just do a 1 row of stitches. It'll be a semi-small stitch. So I'll go get that sewn on. Now I have this fringe all sewn on, and I want to add, this is just kind of a blue gimp fringe. It actually used to have tassels on them, and I cut them off for some reason, a project. But I will go right over top of this fringe. I don't really like how these look so kind of boring right there, the very top part of the fringe. So I'm going to cover that up, and I will just overlap it enough so that you don't see the top of the pink fringe. And I'll just go to my machine, and this is wide, so I'll double stitch that. I'll do a stitch at the top and one towards the bottom. And I may stay away from the very edge with this, maybe stop about 1/4 inch because this is a little thicker. Okay, so this blue one is sewn on, and now I have this gold fringe. And you know, I get my fringe all over the place. I really don't like going and buying fringe new at like Joann Fabric or whatever because number one, it's fairly expensive to buy by the yard. And number two, it's not unique and original. I feel like everybody uses it and your piece doesn't look old and vintage. So, you know, I get mine at flea markets and at Goodwill. I look at the tablecloths, the curtains, the blankets, a lot of times have fringe, capes, shawls, and just cut it right off and use it. So I'm going to lay this one more towards the top, and it's about 5½ inches down from the top. But again, I'm just following these lines. I'm going at the top of this blue one here. And I will stay about 1/4 inch away from the edge when I sew. And this one just might be a 1 row stitch. I'll go right in the middle of this top part here. And I'll just sew that on. Now this fringe is all sewn on. And what I want to do now is, I call it hardware. I always like to add something like a necklace or brooch or flower that's not just fringe. So I have this fringing necklace that I thrifted from somewhere, and I already pre-marked with 2 dots where I want to put this. And this will be about 3½ inches down from the top, and I will lay it on here like this. And the reason I marked with the little black dots is it's hard to keep it in position once you get it where you want it. It's hard to keep it there. So I always lay it out and figure out exactly where I want it. And then I'll just mark with a little dot where I want to sew this. And I will hand sew this in just 2 places. One will be here and one will be here, and it'll swag down a little bit. Now there are extra chains here, and I'll just let them hang, and I will probably add a little charm to the bottom of each one of those. So for right now, I'm just going to hand sew these in 2 spots, and the chain is like a bronzy gold color, and that's the color thread I'll use. I always match the color of the jewelry or the chain and not the color of the fabric that I'm using. Okay, I have one side of the necklace stitched on. Now I'll just show you what I do here. So this is my little black mark, and you may not be able to see that, but I went in from behind and stuck my needle up right where that black dot was, and then I just find one chain link that I focus on, and I just go over top of the, or through the middle of the chain link, back down into the black mark, and I will just only sew that one chain link, and I'll probably put like 10 stitches in, and then when I'm all done, I just tie it off on the back. Just do a little, catch a little piece of fabric, find the loop, and I just kind of go around twice and tighten it like that. Okay, so now I have this sewn on, and I have these two little chains dangling from the necklace, and this one already has a lobster claw clasp on it. So I went to my stash of charms and I found this cute little wooden peace sign, and I'm just going to hook it on to that clasp. And then the opposite side, the chain, I have this little starfish, and I thought that would be fun for kind of a beachy theme. And it has, okay, there's the starfish. It was a necklace pendant, so it has a little ring on it right here. I am just going to take my two little, these are kind of like jewelry pliers. They're just like two little needle nose pliers. And I will just spread that apart a little bit, slip it into the bottom of this chain, and close it up. So now we have a little starfish and a little peace sign. Okay, so the last piece of fringe that I will sew on the front of the bag is this cute little blue bobble fringe. And I will use this top blue line as my guide. It's about 2.5 inches down from the top. And I want the bobbles to cover those stitch marks that I stitched the necklace. That'll just help kind of hide that and make it look more clean and professional. So I'll get that sewn on. Okay, I have all my fringe sewn on the front, and what I want to do now is add tassels to the bottom and the sides. And I made these tassels, and I'm going to show you how. Okay, so how I make my tassels is I start with a piece of cardboard, and this is just cut from a shipping box, and it's about 6 by 6 inches. It's a square. And what I do is I choose the thread or the yarn I want to use, and I begin by cutting 2 pieces of yarn about 10 inches long. Now this is a pretty average thickness of yarn, so I need to wrap this yarn around my cardboard, and I'm going to go around 12 times. If you have a really thin yarn, you may want to go around more, or if you want fatter tassels than this, you can do any size cardboard you want, any thickness of tassel, but this is just how I'm making these for this bag. So I'll just lay my yarn on top of the cardboard, and I'll just kind of hold it with my thumb, and I'll wrap it around. This would be 1. I'm going to wrap mine around 12 times. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, and so I'm ending in the back here. And so I'll just lay my cardboard down, and I'll take my scissors and I'll snip that last piece, set my yarn aside. Now these two 10-inch, they can be 9, 10, whatever inches. What I'll do is at the top of my cardboard, I'll slip this underneath of that yarn, all those that we wound around the cardboard, and I'll come up to the top and I'll double knot that. I'll pull it pretty tight and then do a double knot. Okay, and then I'll just set that up there, and I'll take my scissors and I'll come down at the bottom. I'll just grab all these that we wrapped around, snip it at the bottom, pull it off my cardboard. So now we have that, and then I'll lay that second piece of yarn that we cut down in front of me. I'll lay this on top of it about 1 to 1.5 inches down from the knot, and I'll just double knot that. 1, 2, and then I'll lift it up and look at it, and there'll be some scragglies, and I'll just trim that a little bit. And that's my tassel. Okay, so I sort of have these laid out here so that you can see the position I'm going to want them in. And sometimes I just randomly just take this whole pile of tassels to my machine and sew them around. But this time I only have like a certain amount, so I want to make sure they're all even. So what I'm going to do is I laid them out where I wanted. I only have 3 going down the sides because they will overlap one another when the purse is upright, so you don't need near as many on the sides as you do on the bottom. So I will just go around and mark with a marker where I have these sitting, just at the very edge. That way I know where I want them as I'm sewing. So that'll be the first thing I do, and I'll mark all of these. So I'll just go around and do that and come back. Okay, so how I sew these on is whenever you want fringe or tassels around the edges and the side, when you sew them, they have to go inside the bag. You can't just sew it on like this. You have to put it inside the bag, and I will come down on this piece of yarn about 1 inch and lay it right there and just sew over top. I'll start my needle up here in the sewing machine, and I'll go around. I'll add a tassel wherever I have one of those marks. And then I'll come down with put it through my machine, come down to the next mark and add a tassel. And I'll just do that all the way around. And I'll keep the seam allowance pretty small. I'll try to stay about 1/4 of an inch next to that outside line, and then just go all the way around until I have them sewn on. Okay, so here's what the tassels look like sewn on. And I'm going to do one more thing before I put attach the back to the front, is I made a tutorial on how to make this hippie headband, and I'll put the link in my description. I think it's DIY hippie headband, something like that. But it's basically yarn braids and some flowers and beads, things like that. Well, I'm going to upcycle my upcycle, and I'm going to add this to the purse. And I'm going to have it off to one side, and I'll show you how I do that. Okay, so I'm just going to take my headband, and it's on a yarn braid, and I'm just going to fold it in half, basically, and I'll lay it where I want at the top, and then I'll just stitch over top of it 2 or 3 times. And I decided I want mine right here, and it'll hang down past the tassels, which I think is really cute. And I came over 5.5 inches, and I'll just stitch, about 1/4 inch down over top of that a few times. The next thing I want to do is add straps to the bag, and I will have 2 straps. And This dress will be my lining. It's really pretty fabric and I just love it. But with this dress came a belt. And I'll get back to the dress when we get to the lining, but this belt I will use for the straps. It will save me a lot of work, actually, but I do have purse tutorials where I show you how to make a fabric strap, and I'll link those down in my description. But this is just going to be nice and easy. So this strap is 57 inches long. And so I need 2 straps, so I'm going to fold it in half, and I am just going to snip the end to give me 2 straps, and they're each going to be 28.5 inches long. Okay, so I need to add a strap to the back fabric of the purse and to the front of the purse. And what I do is I went to my ruler and I measured from the edge. This is the top of the bag, and these are the sides. And so I came in from the side 4.5 inches and made a black mark. It's just real little. And then on the opposite side, I came in 4.5 inches and made a black mark right here. So what I'll do is I'll take my strap. I wish you could see those marks better, but okay, so here's my mark. I'm going to take the center of my strap and I'm going to lay it right over that mark. And let me grab my pins and I will just stick a pin in there or 2. And I'm just lining that black mark up with the center of the strap. So now I want to pin the other side. I'll lay it on that black mark and pin it a couple times. And then I'll do the same to the front of the bag. I already made my marks. And I'll lay my strap here and pin it. And I'll lay it on the opposite side and pin that. And then once I get it all pinned, I'll go to my machine and I will just stitch over top, right at the very top here, down maybe 1/4 inch, and I'll go over each one about 5 times. You want these to be nice and sturdy. These are big bags and they'll hold a lot, so you want to be durable, and you can go over it more than 5 times if you want, but I'll stitch over top of that one. This side, I don't have this one pinned on, but let's pretend it is, you know, a bunch of times. And then I'll do the same to the back strap, or the back of the purse, the strap, and just sew over top of those lines. Okay, now I have these straps sewn on, and that's kind of what they look like at the top. And we have a lot going on here, but hopefully by watching this tutorial and some of my others, that even though this looks kind of crazy and overwhelming, if you dissect it and just do one little step at a time, it doesn't seem so daunting. So what we need to do now is we need to put the front and the back together and start assembling the bag. Now, this is the back of the bag, and I didn't do anything to the back, but you can put pockets or fringe or whatever you want to do. Mine, I'm just going to leave because I really like the pattern, and if it was more plain and boring, I would maybe jazz it up. But the first thing I need to do in order to attach the back is bring all this stuff inside. We wanted the handle down like this. We want to leave that down. And then we want to bring everything else in because we need to sew around the sides and we can't get to them like this. So everything in the way of the edges you need to bring in. I need to bring in that fringe. And I just want to make sure everything is clear and out of the way of the edge of the bag. And this will just take me a minute. I just want to make sure everything's nice and neat. So I'm going to finish that up. Okay, so I have everything out of the way here. Now I'll go to the back of the bag and I'll just make sure this strap is facing down. And I want to put right sides together. So this is the right side, and then this will be the right side. And I'll just turn this over and lay it on top of this one. And the first thing I do when I begin pinning this is I pin all four corners. So I'm going to do that now. Okay, once I have all four corners pinned, this is the top of my bag right now, I will just start making my way around the bag and pin the whole thing, all three sides. Of course, we want to leave the top unpinned. So we'll pin the sides and the bottom. And you may have to do a little tucking in here and there, something that slips out. So I'll go ahead and get that all pinned. Okay, I have it all pinned now. This is the top, it's open. I pinned the sides and the bottom. And now what I'll do is I'll go to my machine and I'll start sewing at the top here, and I'll come in about 1/2 inch because there's a lot going on here. I want to make sure I catch everything that's sandwiched in there, so I don't really want to go less than 1/2 inch. So I'll do a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around, and then I'll do it again. I always double stitch everything for durability. Okay, so now I have that all sewn, and before I turn it inside out, I just went to clip these corners a little bit. Of course, not into the thread, but that'll just make the corners poke out a little nicer when we turn it inside out. All right, so let's turn it inside out and see what we have going on. And I'll just push out all the corners and kind of straighten it out here. Isn't that cute? This is when it really starts exciting me because it starts looking like a bag finally. So we have our straps up here. Okay. So what I'll do now is I'll finish taking my time and pressing out those corners, and then I'll take it to my ironing board and I'll turn it over on the back side, and I'll lay a little dish towel over these edges and I'll just press them with an iron, but I protect it with like a thin dish towel. I want to get that nice and crisp and nice. Okay, I'll go do that. Okay, so this is what we have so far. I love it. Okay, so now we just need to make the lining. And like I said before, I'm going to use this dress. And it's really cute. I hate to cut it up, but I did buy it for purse lining basically because I just love the pattern. And it's too small for me anyway. So what I need to do is disassemble it. And all I'm going to do here is cut it at the waistline. Okay, so I have my dress disassembled, and basically I just have some fabric to work with. And so I went back and got that original square, that 20 by 20 that we used to make the bag, and I want to trace it. Now, this time it does sort of matter how you trace it and what's going to be top and bottom. So on the lining, you trace the top and the bottom of the pattern exactly as it is. But on the sides, you want to go out about 1/4 of an inch. Now you don't need to measure that. You can just kind of eyeball it. But the two sides will be a little wider than the original pattern. And when you do that, it's going to matter. So I draw an arrow up, just a little arrow, so I know what part of the pattern goes up. All right, so I'm just going to trace these exact at the top and bottom, and about 1/4 of an inch long or wider on the sides. And then I'll do that twice because we need a front and back also for the lining, and then I'll cut those out. Okay, so now I want to put the two lining pieces together, and this is simple. On the opposite side of this piece of fabric, my little arrow is pointing up this way, so I want to make sure this one is too. And I want to put right sides together. So let me find my arrow. Here's my arrow. It shows me that this end is up. And I just need to sew the sides together. Not the bottom, not the top, only the sides. And this is the top here, this is the bottom. So I'll go to my machine and I'll use about a 1/4 inch seam allowance and a fairly small stitch. And I'll go down one side and I'll go down it again. I double stitch for durability, and then I'll come to this side and do the same thing. And you can pin this if you want, but when they're just nice straight edges like this, I don't usually pin those. So I have my lining sides sewn together, and now I want to attach it to the purse. And what I'll do is I'll go to my purse and I'll make sure that these straps are down, because we're going to stitch along this top line and I don't want these up and in the way. So we got to make sure those are down on both sides. And then I take my lining. Now I have little arrows on here. This is the top. Let me show you. And this is the bottom. Now, I pretty much have a square with no pockets or closures, so it doesn't really matter what side I slide over my purse. We're going to slide this over the bag. But if yours matters and you have pockets, the bottom goes over top of the bag. So if you had a pocket facing this way, where you put stuff in, you would want the bottom part to slide over the bag. And all we do is just slide this over top of the bag. I'm going to reach in here and grab my purse. Okay. Now this just takes a little messing with. What we want to do is line up the top of the purse with the top of the lining. Okay, and now we need to pin this all the way around. And how I begin pinning, and this is really important if you have like a magnetic snap that needs to line up perfectly. To do this when you start pinning, take the side seam of your lining and the side seam of the inside of your purse there, and line those up and stick a couple pins in there. Okay. And then go to the opposite side and find that outside seam of the lining, the inside seam of the purse. I don't think I told you, this needs to be inside out. This lining, you turn it inside out before you slide it over top of your bag. It has to be right sides together. So this is the right side of the purse, and the right side of the fabric, this is the more vibrant color, I want those two facing each other. And I'm looking at this lining inside out right now. Can't believe I forgot to tell you that. That's a very important. So, okay, so I'm pinning these side seams. And now, that'll give me a better idea here of where I need to pin. Now just kind of straighten that up. And I will line the bag up with the lining and pin all the way across. And I'll do the same on the opposite side. Okay, I have it pinned completely around on both sides. And what I need to do is sew it. And you'll notice that the pins are on the outside of my bag. That'll just make it easier when I'm sewing to pluck those out. So I will take that front plate off my sewing machine and slide this in, stick the needle down. It doesn't really matter where out on the bag you start. And I sort of let the bag dictate to me whether I do a 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch seam allowance. Sometimes things aren't lining up perfectly. You need to go a little deeper, but you know, in between a 1/4 inch and a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And you know, you just start going forward, back stitch, and you just go all the way around, just plucking those needles out as you go, sewing along the top. And you don't need to double stitch this because we'll do a top stitch. So just go around once. Okay, so here I am at my machine. Just going to remove that front plate and open up the bag. We have it pinned on both sides, and I'm going to slide it just one side in underneath the needle and set that presser foot down on there. Forward stitch and back stitch. And I'm just going to sew all the way around. Okay, I have this top all sewn here. Now I'm just going to go around a little bit and trim it. I want it trimmed down to about a 1/4 of an inch above that stitch line. I just don't want a bunch of glumpy fabric to make it look messy. So I'll just trim that up a little bit and come back. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is just take that lining and pull it up over the bag so we can see it. Get some of this other stuff out of the way. Okay. Threads everywhere. I try to trim as I go, but sometimes I miss threads. Okay, so this is what it looks like at the moment. And so this lining still has an open end. And I don't pin when I do this, but you can if you want. I need to close this up. And all I do is just take the end and tuck it in. And then I'll stick that in my machine. And I'll just kind of fold in the raw edges as I sew. Just kind of go along and tuck those in. It's really pretty easy. You can tuck those in and pin all along here if you want, but I don't need to. You probably don't either. So I'm going to go ahead and tuck those in and double stitch the bottom. Okay, so now I have the bottom of my lining all stitched shut, and I just need to stick it, this whole piece of lining, inside the bag. And you'll want to take your time with this. You want to kind of get the corners down together, push the corner of the lining down into the corner of the purse. Just kind of play with it a little bit. Make sure it's in there nice. And now I just need to press the top of this so that we can do a top stitch. I haven't pressed this yet. I just kind of want to give you a close-up of what's going on here. So when I go to my ironing board, I will just make sure this lining is, you know, kind of lined up with the top of the bag, but I want the lining to be about 1/4 of an inch down, and you can kind of control that with the way you press it. And so otherwise you'll see it more. I like the lining to be a little more hidden, so I just make sure when I kind of mess with it and fold it over, it's about 1/4 of an inch down from the top of the fabric, and then I just press it nicely all the way around. Okay, so here's the top of my bag. I have it pressed all the way around. And now I want to do a top stitch. And a top stitch, you'll see from the outside, so you'll want to coordinate your thread with the outside color and your bobbin thread with the inside color. And I will just go around about 1/2 an inch down and make a nice straight stitch along the edge. That just helps finish it, and it also helps that lining to stay put and not sort of creep out of your bag. And after you press it or while you press it, you can pin that if you want. I don't do that anymore. I just don't really feel I need to. Okay, so on my machine, I still have that front plate off, and I will slide the bag in underneath the needle. But what you need to do here is take your straps, you know, some purses have one, some have two, slide that underneath your needle, and that way it won't get all tangled up when you're trying to sew. And so what I do is I just stick that underneath the needle about 1/2 an inch down, and I'll just take my time because I want this to be nice and neat, and I will just take my time and just go around.